Hey all, this is Chris Johnson at Living Waters Fly Fishing today with a informational video about the new Texas Taper. So what is the Texas Taper? I've got a stack of them right here. They're just a phenomenal line. I can show you a box here that might help a little bit. So this is the new Texas Taper. You'll see we've got a Living Waters logo on the box because it is only available here. And if you'll notice, it has all the little technologies on the front there. You'll see AST+. It's got floating texture, welded loops, improved dry tip. It's got line ID and camo. We'll go through all that. I'll tell you a little bit about each of those. And then if you ever look at the back of the box, it's got all the information there that you need as well, including a fun little bit. I'm going to try to get that centered on camera for you, but that little emblem right there, that is a Rio Grande Cichlid. It's the only cichlid that will ever appear on a line box for scientific anglers. So there's some fun stuff that makes it very uniquely Texan, and so we're going to talk about that because we've been getting a lot of questions about what is the Texas Taper, why can I not find any information about it, and we've been getting that through Facebook, Instagram, email, phone call, all of it. Everybody's like, everybody's talking about it, but nobody knows anything about it. So this video is to demystify my favorite fly line. So long story short, this has probably been, it's been about a 2.5 to 3 year process from kind of beginning to now on the Texas Taper. The line is designed by yours truly. So I actually designed the line from pretty much the tip of it to the other end of it. So it's just one of those things of went through all the fly line and took the taper and the grain weights and the coatings and everything. All of that I poured all my input into, and scientific anglers and their absolute mastery of all things fly line, they were able to create what is my dream fly line. It's amazing. And so I'll talk with you a little bit more about just the field testing process and what all we put it through in some of the meetings that were had there, but just to kind of tell you a little bit more about what the line is for, what it does, what it's about, all that sort of stuff. So in effect, if you remember back a little ways, there were two lines that we used to carry as a fly shop. One was called the ART, which was the all-round taper is what that stood for. The Scientific Angler's ART was a half line weight overweighted. It was a Mastery Series line, had a textured tip though, and it still sold at a Mastery price. So you were actually getting that last little bit of the tip was textured, but they didn't charge you the price of a textured line. So that was kind of neat. The taper itself was wonderful. It was perfect for, I would say it's a little bit more aggressive than your average dry fly line, but it was still very presentation forward, very presentation focused. It didn't load rods real well in close unless they were softer rods. So when you got in the fast rod game, you'd get a little bit, even though it was a half line weight heavy, because the taper was a lot more gradual. And what I mean by that, anytime you look on the back of a fly line box, you'll see a diagram of that taper. And I can show you, actually the box that's sitting right there will have it. This is just a diagram of the taper. So you can see how this is the weight forward section of the line, and that would be the running line following there. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about taper, is how this portion of the line is constructed and what that does for your cast. So the ART, it was kind of more of a gradual step up, and then it tapered off very sharply in the rear, but was more elongated in terms of an actual head itself. The actual head of the line being that whole section that is tapered, the front head or the whole taper section. So what I want to talk about is the differences of this line and the ART, and I based this line off of two tapers. And so the second one was the SBT, which was the short belly taper. Now, what is a belly, you might ask? Well, again, the belly of the line, you can see, I know it's a little hard to see here on the diagram, but the belly of the line is this darker gray portion there in that tapered section. So it's actually between the front head and the rear taper. So if you look at that, the whole head, excuse me, if I were to use better terminology here, apologize. The head of the line is this entire section here. But the front taper and rear taper are what make up the bookends, if you will, of the head. The belly is in between the tapers. And so the head of the line, if you will, is the entire tapered section where it kind of steps up and steps down. Running line follows that. So the two lines it was based off of, we talked a little bit about the ART. The SBT is a short belly taper, which means that the taper was very, very compact. So the entire head of the line was very, very short, and it loaded rods really, really well in close. a lot of people, especially the casting instructor and your distance casting crowd, a lot of people don't favor short bellies because they get a little clunky. What I mean by that is as soon as you get that, say the head was 26 feet or something like that, and I think the short belly taper was somewhere in that realm. If you look at that, as soon as you're 26 feet of fly line out, you're in the running line, and it gets a little clunky because it's kind of like, I guess it's not this dramatic, so please understand that. It's like throwing a golf ball with a kite string, where you're trying to, turn something over, but it just doesn't feel right. It's not that dramatic. It casts much better than that. But the whole point being is a short belly taper, if they're not made well, they get a little clunky. The SBT, though, when that was a true short belly line that Scientific Angler came out with, there was some secret sauce in that line. And and to this day, it still kind of amazes me that it threw as well as it did. The current day equivalent of the SBT, because they discontinued both the ART and SBT, both those lines are gone. The current SBT, if you will, is the Creek Trout, and the Creek Trout is available in an Amplitude Smooth. The Creek Trout taper is literally an SBT with a couple little tweaks, and so it's got a little bit more handling line on the rear, and they added the AST Plus, so it kind of softened it just a touch, if you will, on the transition from taper into the running line, and I think that was an added plus. The original SBT roll cast like crazy, it would mend like crazy, it loved chucking an indicator rig or streamers or any sort of weight to it, had a lot of guts. But then when you started actually getting line out, instead of falling apart like what you would think as soon as you get the head out, a lot of times where the entire head of the line is out and out of the final tip top of the fly rod, instead of it casting real clunky, it stayed very smooth. Well, the Creek Trout, they added a handling line transition that was a little bit greater from that head to the running line, making it even more of a smooth handling line and a lot of fun to cast. And I've got several in my arsenal and really like them. The problem is here in Texas, it gets really hot. I don't know if you'll notice this, but 100 degrees in the summer, not exactly the best place for let's just say a moderate to cold water fly line. Most of your fly lines are made to be kind of used in a moderate to cold water conditions where they're, don't have memory, where they're very pliable, and that's very helpful when, we're in the winter months fishing the Guadalupe River, or spring and fall, it's still fine. But in our Texas summer months, sometimes they do take a little bit of a beating where they just get a little noodly and a little soft, and I got tired of that because they get a little gummy in the guides. It doesn't happen often because a lot of times when we're wade fishing, the line's in the water when we're stripping it in, and that cools it down and everything's fine. But from a boat vantage point, we're doing like canoes, rafts, things like that, it can play a little bit of an issue, or create a bit of an issue, if you will, where the line just doesn't have the rigidity to perform throughout the day. So all that being said, the Texas taper is a mashup of an ART and an SBT, or an ART and a Creek Trout, if you will, because that's the modern day equivalent. It takes those two lines and crams them together with coating enhancements, a few more technologies, and it also, I changed the taper in the tip section a little bit. So just to kind of make a long story short, it's the culmination of a lot of things. So to talk about the Texas taper and what it does differently, the SBT loaded rods in really, really close, but it was sometimes a little bit heavy if you were doing presentation-driven casts. The ART didn't load rods as well enclosed, but was very presentation forward. So I wanted to take both and combine it. So I didn't want a head that was quite as long as an ART, didn't want it to be quite as short as an SBT, and I also wanted to be a slam up of the tapers where it still did taper up gradually and stepped off into handling line before it went into the running line. If you look on the box again, and I can show that here on the camera, you can see that on the very tip of the line there, where it says front tapered. I'm sorry I don't have a pointer, so I'm gonna have to use my finger here, but right here on the hand, on this first little bit where it says floating texture, that's in that the very first 10 feet of line is actually textured, so that it's never in your hands when you're casting. That portion is textured, and you can see that on the box where it says floating texture. That makes up it all goes through the presentation tip and into the front taper. So if you'll look, the texture ends before the actual taper is finished. So that alone is kind of crazy. There's just not that much of it. But I want you to look at the very tip section of the line. This is what differentiates the Texas taper from a lot of other lines out there. It is a very thinly tapered tip that juts up into the front taper. And you can see where it steps up in that first like 5 feet. So that last 5 feet or so of line, and it'll vary a little bit depending on line weight, because I don't know if you noticed, but on the box it'll mention the head lengths of how they are proportional. The 2 weight's a little bit shorter, 8 weight's going to be dramatically longer. They just proportionately grow as your line weights gain in weight. So that is something that most fly lines, that's pretty standard throughout any sort of lineup with a fly line, as those head lengths will increase based on the weight of the line, just because of distances and the usage. With this, that presentation tip is very thin compared to the taper. What that does is when you terminate a cast, and say you drive one right into the wind, it will still turn over because the taper itself is pretty beefy. But what it did is it created a presentation forward line that still has drive. And so it also is exceptional at doing things like curve cast and casting around obstacles and anything like that. But I think from the clientele standpoint, the people who have bought the line and fished the line, and myself having fished it for at least a year at this point, I think I got my first prototypes right around spring or coming into summer. So it's been almost a year that I've been testing the line, not quite, but almost. And so that's about how long we've been messing with this thing in terms of the physical side of the line. From the from the theoretical, we've been at it for several years. But the actual presentation tip allows you to muscle a cast without slapping a fly on the water. So if you're, like take carp for instance, you've got a tailing carp. You see it in the flat, it's tailing, it's happy. Sometimes you get happy too and you thumb a cast or you drive one too hard and something with bead chain or dumbbells goes blat right on it. Or even worse, you terminated the loop a little bit low and the line crashes into the water and you scare the fish. This line, the Texas Taper, will not allow you to do that because that presentation tip will always lay soft. And so while the taper has the drive, think about the last several feet of the Texas Taper is a thick leader, if you want to put it like that. It basically is that transition point from your leader into a thicker fly line. It just does so a little bit more gradually in that last several feet. What that does is it really guarantees a soft presentation, it's incredibly accurate, and that section is textured, so it actually is going to float a little higher. Not only do you have floating texture on the end of the line, you also have that dry tip, and I think that you can see that, yeah, it'll say that on the other side of the box. It'll talk about that where it has that improved dry tip technology, that little water droplet with an X through it. Basically, they add to the last portion of the line only, they add another additive to the line that increases flotation, and you have the texture on top of that, which also will allow that. You think about this, it's like dimples on a golf ball. If you take a round line that has indents all over it, it's going to trap air underneath it, not too dissimilar to, placing a cup on the water upside down, how it traps air in the cup. So you're going to have the texture working for you, dry tip technology working for you, and then that's only going to be in that last several feet of fly line. The rest of the line is built on an entirely different structure where it is actually a blend of a fresh and a saltwater coating. So all fly lines have a core and a jacket. So the core is the backbone of the fly line. This is built on a multifilament core, which is made for moderate to cooler climates. But if you take that core and throw a saltwater jacket on it, it increases the rigidity of the line because saltwater materials are going to be obviously a lot stiffer. They don't need as much flotation because the density of saltwater floats those lines. You ever wonder why your saltwater lines have a little bit harder time floating in freshwater? It's because they don't have to put as much of a floating agent in the coating because it's made to be fished in saltwater, which is more dense than fresh. So sorry we're getting nerdy, but people wanted to know about the line. We're going to go into it. So what we did in this line, and this has been my idea for a while, and I asked when we were in the formal phases of this, the Scientific Angler Bass Bug Taper is a perfect example. Very beefy. I think it's 2 line weights overweighted. It's very, very stout. It's made to turn over big bass bugs, heavy windy conditions, faster rods. It's made to be an animal. I wanted like a bass bug taper light, where basically it still had that rigidity. So what they did is in the newest iteration of the bass bug taper, it's a multi-filament core, but with a saltwater jacket on the outside that has a little enhanced flotation. What that does is it increases the rigidity of the line in heat. So when it's very, very hot outside, the bass bug taper doesn't go to a full noodle. I wanted something like that, but that had a little bit more cold water game to it too, because full confession, I love fishing the mountains, and everybody knows this. I'm absolutely addicted to that fish right there. I love Rio Grande cutthroat trout, and I fish the ART taper quite a bit for them. So the deal about Rio Grande cutthroats is you're not casting very far. My average fish is caught inside of 20 feet. So you think about that, you add a leader to it, I'm like, I just need a textured tip and a leader to be good. And then if I'm ever on a mountain lake or on a bigger river, I'm gonna have wind involved. So I need something that's gonna be, you know, pretty demonstrative in its delivery. It's just, I want something that's gonna be very authoritative, very bold in the way it delivers a fly, but without smacking something on the surface. And the way to create that in this case was I wanted all of that in a package that still had some play in the Texas heat and in, you know, say we get a freak cool front in Colorado or New Mexico, or, you know, a storm that knocks the degrees down 20 degrees in an hour. You know, I want something that still can play in all climates. The way to do that is I didn't want a bass bug taper that had the full saltwater jacket on it. I wanted to see if we could mix the two, so where we could blend a fresh and a saltwater coating to make that jacket. And in talks with scientific anglers, they said, we've never done that before. I was like, well, can we try? That was the, like, I said, if it doesn't work, we won't do it. I'll just go with the saltwater jacket and we'll live. But if we can do it and then put that dry tip technology, basically that end of that line has a very, you know, textured, you know, gonna be this delivery, you know, presentation focused tip section of the line. And then as soon as we get into the meat of the matter, I've got a little bit more rigidity in the line. I'm gonna have a lot of authority, a lot of power, and it's gonna be heat resistant but cold tolerant. And so that's gonna be really, it's just right in the middle of the road on all that. Well, they tried it, and doggone it if it didn't work. And so this is the first fly line ever produced by Scientific Angler. And I'm sure it won't be the last because we cracked a code on something. But nonetheless, the first line ever available to the public that has a blend of a fresh and saltwater coating, where it's kind of a mix of both. It's not one or the other. It's actually the hybrid of both that allows it to basically be all Texas. I want a line that I don't have to respool when it's 30 degrees outside, but that I can still cast in our 100-degree heat in the summer. And that, prior to now, has never really existed in this form. You could make stuff work. This is built to do that, and that's the difference. Is I'm not trying to make something do anything anymore. We made the product that does it versus having products and making them do it. This is a totally different animal. So that was one thing that I was really passionate about, is that blending of those coatings, and it worked. So obviously it has welded loops on both sides. You've got the Scientific Angler line ID on the end of it, and they spelled out Texas on it. So in case you're from here and you're really proud of your state, your fly line actually says Texas. So if that means something for you, then there you go. But you've got that textured tip, but in the end of the fly line, it actually varies colors. So if you look on the box again, it says camo. That is the last several feet of the line variates colors. It actually goes, the colors on here, I think the way they have it listed, it's sage green, leather, and willow. So I can actually pull one out of the box here so y'all can see the colors on the line itself. So that's the actual willow color there. And then the sage green, right here, there's the sage green and the leather there on that tip section there. So you can see how it actually variates colors. The rest of the head will go to that leather, and then it basically finishes out and goes to willow for the running line, which basically gives you this. I am big on stealth. I fish in camo a lot. I love fishing in tight places. I love being on creeks. So the less fish know about me and my cast, the better. So to break that color up on final delivery, it's only in the tip section of the line, so you can still track it. So it's really, really easy. But basically it breaks up the profile of the line. There's the texture that makes it easier to lift off the water and not rip. And then you've also got the actual blending of those coatings plus the dry tip technology in the end of the line. The thing is crafted for presentation. But the funny part is when we took this line to Trout Fest, this was the first time the public had ever been able to cast it, was at Trout Fest this year. I had a whole slew of I had everything in a 2 through an 8 weight, and that's the full line range that it comes in. It comes from 2 all the way up to 8. I took all those reels and we just say, hey, bring your own rod, or you can use one of ours, doesn't matter, just cast it. I said, but here's what I want you to do. Cast it close, medium, and far. So just close, middle, far, and try the line at those distances and then kind of play in between. In close, the Texas Taper is as delicate as a fly line could possibly want to be. That presentation tip turns it over beautifully. It lays a dry fly down softly. I mean, I was throwing hair bugs with it yesterday at mid-range, but in close, I can lay down a pillow soft dry fly cast. It's wonderful. So close range carp, close range dry fly, stream bass, stream trout in the mountains, anything like that, sunfish rising on bugs on Brushy Creek. Great for all of that. Then your mid-range, most of where we fish on like the Llano, the San Marcos, anything like that, the San Gabriel, the Guadalupe, any of those rivers that I just mentioned, all those ones that are just classic Texas rivers and streams. That sort of stuff, you're going to be throwing that, 30 to 50 foot range quite a bit. That is where the meat of the matter is on this. And I'll flip the box over here so you can see this. I'm going to prop it up with another one here to see if I can get that to focus. Pardon me, I don't have an assistant here, it's just me. And I'm also working on limited monitor space. But if you'll look, I know that's a little hard to see in small numbers, but your head lengths are, I'll just go 2, 3, 4, 5. It goes 24 feet, 25 feet, 26 feet, 28 feet. And then it jumps a little bit more when you start going up. It basically, you're gonna go all the way up to 34 on an eight weight, but the head length basically increases 2 feet per weight. And so what's fun about that is that, 28-ish, on a 5 weight, most people are going to be using it. It's just under 30 feet. So if you know how fly lines are measured by weight, they're measured by the grain weight of the first 30 feet of fly line. So all the grain weight is housed essentially in the head on this one. With the exception of the upper weights that top 30 feet, most all that weight that's measured is right there. And then you step down to a running line, which makes it quite a bit lighter in the air than the equivalent lines that have a longer taper throughout. So what I mean by that is this. Thick section's really short, then it goes real thin so that you can shoot a long way and it's very easy to manipulate at distance. But the line itself is 3/4 of a line weight over. So technically, this is a 7 weight I have in my hand. It's actually a 7 3/4. Now you're like, well, what does that mean? Well, a standard scientific angler's MPX, just to give you an idea, is a 1/2 weight heavy. And then the creek trout, that is a current line as well, is a full weight heavy. I wanted this line to come in between those two, where it wasn't quite as heavy and it wouldn't slow rods down, because if you overweight a rod, it slows the action down. I didn't want it to slow stuff down, but I also didn't want it to be quite as light as, say, like what the ART was and what the MPX is. I wanted to have a little bit more authority in close. The fun part is once you've got the grain weight out, you're in the running line. So it's not a difficult line to carry in the air. It actually is pretty effortless to keep aloft before presenting, because you're not carrying as much weight throughout the line. Since it's not gradually tapering down throughout, say, 50 feet, it steps off. By the time in an 8 weight, I think you're 34 feet? Yeah, 34 feet in the head. And by the 8 weight, you're done. I mean, at 34 feet, it's over, which coincidentally, this can play in the salt. You can do trout and redfish with this as well. And I wouldn't do it on a boat deck in the hottest of months. I'm not going to say this line does everything, but it does most things. And so, like, if you were fishing, it's probably a 3-season saltwater line. It's a great line for that. And from a weighting vantage point, it could potentially be a 4-season line. If you've got line in the water that's still in that, 80-degree range, it'd still be fine. 80, 85 degrees, no problem. On a boat deck where stuff is baking, that's a little bit different story. That's where those solid core lines, you really want those, the Tropicore with that jacket that keeps those lines stiff. That's a different spectrum altogether. But with the Texas Taper, what we've done is by blending that coating, having a compact front head, it's going to cast with a lot of authority in that mid-range. So anything that we're actually doing in the sweet spot, so to speak, of that 30 to 50 feet, this line is golden. It loves it. The perk is by the time you've got there, dump it, just shoot it. You can literally take that, throw a haul in it, and send a real heavy cast, aim it high, and she'll take the whole line. And so the beautiful part is you're in running line. So casting distance also is not difficult at all, because the front head, being that it's short, it's not truly a shooting head, but kind of functions as one. And so now you've got a head that can yank that running line out of there. The beautiful part is, if you look again on the box, I know this is in very small print, so I apologize, but right here you'll see where it says handling line. we kept the handling line on the back side of that so that there is a smooth transition into running, and you don't get that jerky feel of what would be a normal, like a lot of short-headed lines are real jerky or real punchy, where you get to the end of the loop and it's like, and you really feel that yank. I don't like that. I like a smooth casting line. That handling taper really aided in that transition and made the line a true presentation-focused line that can play anywhere in Texas. And that's what this line is all about. So it's presentation forward, but still has a lot of guts. And it can drive a hair bug, a weighted streamer, anything like that. I got a message last night from a customer who caught this massive alligator gar on the line. And we've had reports pouring in left, right, and sideways. We've had shops wanting to carry them, I understand that. They're only available here. So this is a Living Waters fly fishing specific available product only here. It's designed by me for here. We're gonna get one in everybody's hands at once one. And we've got it in a 2 through an 8 weight. The field testing side, so how does one go about actually proving a line? Because, you know, you can design a taper. I literally hand drew it out and gave scientific anglers the grain weights I wanted, the head lengths I wanted, the taper lengths I wanted. They had the blueprint, if you will, and then they made it happen. And there is nobody out there doing it like this. Scientific Angler is the best in the business. I'm sorry. Like, actually, I'm not sorry. I love them. I'm an SA guy through and through. So, and there's a reason they're the only line brand I carry in store. Am I biased? Yes, but I mean, I'm not going to say fight me, but it's just one of those things of like, I have cast other lines. I have fished them. I have cast them. We've even carried other brands in the past. Nobody does what they're doing. I'm sorry, it's just the best out there. And so if I'm gonna make a fly line, I want it made by the best. And SA is unequivocally that in my mind. And in actuality, I don't know anybody who has put the technology into the lines that they do. And again, I keep referencing the box, but one of the most important elements of this entire fly line is that right there, and that is AST+. It is an additive to the fly line jacket that literally migrates outward as the line ages. That is the single largest breakthrough in fly lines, I would say, in the last decade, where we now have an additive that isn't just a static additive that stays there as the line wears down and you eventually wear through it. Instead, it's impregnated into the jacket and continues to migrate outward, refreshing that outer coating. It makes these lines feel brand new all the way through their lifespan. It's just so cool. And I mean, obviously you want to clean a fly line if you're getting it dirty. That still helps it do what it needs to do. But the fact of the matter is you've got the line helping you with that as well. It's not an animate object, but there is some mobility taking place in that coating's migration, or that additive's migration into the outer portion of the coating that's refreshing the line as it ages. Really, really cool technology. I think it's monumental. So that is also an element of this line. Once we receive the physical samples, so they actually create the line, they make it up there in Michigan, they sent the samples down, and I sent it to 3 field testers. Austin Orr, who many of you know is Elevate Fly Casting. I got Chase Smith, who is Fish Chase Flies. Many of y'all know and probably have his flies. He's a fly designer for Montana Fly Company as well now. Chase is a dear friend, as is Austin, known those guys for years. And then Brandon Bales, and they're like, well, wait a minute, that's not a Texas boy. It's like, I know, but sometimes I think he wishes he lives here. So that's the whole deal. Is Brandon is a warm water guy through and through. It's not that he doesn't trout fish a little bit here and there, but that guy's chasing smallmouth and rock bass and sunfish and carp and all sorts of stuff over there in Alabama and that surrounding area. And also, he's in the South. It's hot, it's humid, there's a lot of that going on in play, and he also fishes some spring creeks and things, or rivers, I would say, that do have a little bit more. I mean, if you've got smallmouth, your water's a little cooler. So it's one of those things that he's doing that on a little bit different spectrum than what we are here. So I wanted to have similar fishing techniques, but in a different range as well. So I wanted to test it in a few different places. And then obviously I field tested the line. So those are the 4 lines that got sent out and that were all in 5 weights and said, go put them, just murder them. I want you to do whatever you can possibly do. Use them, abuse them, put them through the paces. And so I took 2 hardcore anglers and did that. And then I took Austin and myself as the casting instructors who also fish a lot. And we pretty much came up with a well-rounded opinion of the line. And I told him not to spare any detail. I said, let me know what you hate about it. Like, because we can change it. We're still in the formative process. I am happy to tell you that it was unanimous from all four of us, because I didn't want to touch it either. But all three guys that I sent the line to, and myself included, when we got the prototypes in, the opinion was don't change a thing. And so what you have in the box is literally off of a notepad of mine that I drew everything out, did the schematic, did all the grain weights, sent it to SA. They make it, they put it in a box, they send it to us. It's perfect. It's just absolutely perfect. So I had Chase throwing his spiral spooks and game changers and all kinds of stuff on that on a 5-weight. And he normally fishes heavier rods. He said he fished it all day in just super hot conditions. He said it would turn it over and it would tolerate our heat. Austin, he is a casting guru. So he's one of those guys, he's roll casting, single spay, overhead, any sort of angular cast where you're having to move things, like kind of go around corners, curve cast, stuff like that. Rotational casts like roll and spay. I need people to put that line through those paces, because I don't like a line that does one thing. Casting is not a means to an end to me. It literally is the tool that, and I have multiple tools in that box. So I mean, if it's Belgian cast, roll cast, spay cast, sidearm, overhead, curve cast, you name it, you've got to be able to do all that stuff to accomplish your goals on the water. I wanted a line that didn't shy away from any of those techniques. I want it to play nice with multiple rods and multiple casting styles. Between Austin and myself, I really do believe we put this thing through the ringer, and it's pretty special. It's got something going for it. And I'm not going to brag on it too much on the casting end, but you're going to love it. It's really special, and the more that I play with it, the more impressed I am by it. I gave it over to Brandon Bales in Alabama. He caught fish on it like crazy, and I think the general opinion is, when are they coming out and when can I get some more? Because we wanted to put them on every one of our rods, and I have now just started progressively spooling a lot of my rods that I use principally in Texas to the Texas Taper. So it's born, bred, made for here. And this is the first line, truly. There's a lot of saltwater fly lines that kind of encompass the Gulf Coast and things like that. This is the first fly line ever made for warm water Texas. And that is something that's spectacular for me. But I also love the fact that I can take it because of the textured tip that makes it a little bit more flexible. And that last end, that dry tip technology, which is also going to add a little bit of softness to that last few feet of the fly line, it makes it a deadly line in close for presentation shots on cutthroat trout in the mountains, brook trout, up in the Appalachians, wherever you want to go. You can take it, you can take this line anywhere, and it will do the job. And so that's what the Texas Taper is all about. I guided with it in Colorado last summer. We were throwing mice on it in a 5-weight, and in cold water conditions, and it was turning mice over in long shots, and it was killing it. I mean, it was amazing to watch this line. We could dump the entire fly line with a mouse. And I was so impressed by that. And we caught a lot of fish doing it too, so we were fishing still water and just racking fish on it. It was incredible. But with this line we've now fished for carp. In fact, earlier this week was out on Brushy Creek, and we were casting to dry fly rising carp. We're able to lay these super soft casts into dry fly rising carp, which are notoriously spooky, and we were catching them. It was amazing. So with that, we didn't change fly lines from there to throw into bass up in the shallows. So it was really cool that it just has so many different sides to it. I had customers at Trout Fest tell me, I feel like I just casted 3 different fly lines. And in effect, you did, but it's all in one package. So that is I know that's a little bit more than I probably wanted to go, but that is what the Texas Taper is all about. Born, bred, and made for here. Also, as part of the mission of this line, you can see on the back of the box, the final bullet point, Fly Fish the Republic. We are going to take a portion of proceeds off this line and donate that back to fish conservation in Texas, Colorado, and New Mexico. So again, just by getting one of the lines, you're actually giving back to Texas and even some of our neighboring states that were in the old Republic of Texas. And that's the thing that's so cool about this, is we're able to do conservation work on the ground as a result of an exclusive Living Waters product. So highly encourage you, just come by the shop and test one. Bring your own rod, cast one of ours, come by the shop. We've got them in every weight, strung on reels. Just come try it out. I know you'll be impressed. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But that is a little, I was gonna make this brief. This ain't a brief video on the Texas Taper, and it took a lot more work than this, but I've enjoyed it. I want you to enjoy it too. So take this, cast it where it belongs, right in the heart of the Texas Hill Country. Thank y'all so much for watching. If you have any questions, contact the shop. We'll see you in store on the water really soon. Take care.